Good morning for the United States and good afternoon across Russia. Thank you for joining today's webinar titled Strengthening Resilience in the Classroom. We are going to talk about building mental and emotional strength in students, and especially within the context of an English classroom. I would like to thank the American Center in Moscow for hosting this event. And I am really thrilled to be here with you today and to address this important topic. First, I need to introduce myself. So my name is Joanna Spice. I am currently living in Green Bay, Wisconsin. At the moment, I work in administration of a technical college, but my passion has always been, and my job has always been connected to English, teaching English as a foreign language or second language. I have been an instructor of English as a foreign or second language for over 20 years. I have been a teacher trainer in the Bachelor of Education program for pre-service teachers. And I worked in various locations in Poland, where I'm originally from, in several university-based centers, language centers in the United States, but also in the Middle East and in Japan. And I do hope that my experiences, what I have personally seen in the classroom, will translate also to your context, to your students, and your experiences in the classroom too, and hope that this will be helpful to you. So what I am hoping to address today is to help you understand what resilience is and why it is important for all of us to build resilience in the classroom. We will talk about several strategies that you can use to foster resilience and create a sense of belonging for your students in the class. And I'm obviously also hoping that the ideas that I will leave you with will be practical, kind of low-tech solutions that you can take to your classroom almost right away. As English teachers, language teachers, we kind of face a very unique challenge because we are helping our students not only to learn a new language, but also to kind of develop this mental and emotional strength to overcome difficulties, to persist in learning, to take on the challenge of learning something completely new, rewire our brains a little bit, and despite difficulties, keep pushing. So let's begin by looking at what resilience is and why it would be important in an English classroom. So resilience is typically defined as an ability to bounce back from challenges, from obstacles, from disappointments, and kind of to adapt to difficult circumstances and move on. For sure, everybody in all aspects of our lives has experienced some challenges and disappointments and obstacles. And the most frustrating situations are when we keep trying and we put a lot of effort into something like developing a language skill and things don't go our way. Sometimes challenges come from situations that are completely beyond our control, which can be even more demotivating because we are left with situations we didn't cause, but we have to deal with their consequences. So that flexibility in adapting to new situations, to overcoming difficulties is a life skill that is important in every context, definitely in a teaching and learning context as well. It's easy to kind of throw your hands up and say, oh, well, I'm not good at this and I will never be able to succeed. And to believe that we will never really make things better no matter what we do. And for sure, learning a language is not easy. It might look easy to some, but we know that even in those cases, when we are looking at people who have mastered a foreign language, it cost them a lot of effort. It came with a lot of commitment, and it cost them a lot of time. They spent a lot of time on mastering that skill. So it's not like it just comes naturally. And I know that I am speaking here to a group of avid language learners. So I'm sure that you have also had experiences with both success in language learning, but also mistakes that you've made. And nothing really comes without experiencing failure and disappointment, sometimes embarrassment. So that saying that that we all learn from our mistakes, or we should learn from our mistakes, is a saying because it's true. If we made a mistake, we probably will remember it for the rest of our lives. And that's that learning process that we want to encourage our students to see. So resilience is about learning strategies to pick yourself up, sometimes again and again and again, after encountering disappointment, after not being able to do what we think we should be able to do. And it's about restarting action and finding new solutions that will help guide us out of difficult situations and give us a sense of accomplishment and success. So lots of words on this slide, but that's because resilience is a very complex concept. In general, when people look at defining what resilience is, they look at that growth mindset that people need to have. It also requires emotional regulation. So we have to be in control of our emotions. And when emotions run high, we have to be able to bring them down, to be able to control them. And then, of course, there is learning from setbacks, taking the experiences that we have and kind of turning them around and using them as opportunities to make things better in the future. So these are kind of the three big overarching components of resilience. But even underneath those, we are actually looking at various factors, various dispositions and skills that we need to develop. So I put purpose in there because I believe that students need to know, they need to have a sense of purpose. They need to know that learning a language, although it might be difficult to them, is going to be useful. And it's going to open some doors for them. It might enable them to achieve certain things in life, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but maybe in the future. So that sense of purpose is kind of crucial to driving both optimism and intrinsic motivation. But with purpose, it's also important for us in the classroom to be stating why we do certain things. So students might be wondering, why do I have to do this practice grammar exercise? Or why do I need to learn how to write an essay in a specific way in English? Explain that purpose for them. Give them a connection to real life, that is going to kind of spark a little bit more interest, allow them to use that intrinsic motivation that is not connected to their grades, that they are not doing this for you. They're doing it for themselves. That's going to be what will push them to continue working hard, to putting effort and time and picking themselves up when they occasionally fall. Students also need to build their problem solving and coping mechanisms. Those don't come naturally. They need to be modeled, they need to be exemplified, they need to be practiced in the classroom. In essence, what we are looking for is for students to gradually build kind of a repertoire of different solutions that they can reach for when things don't go their way. They need to be able to figure out, with your help, where they find that help. Who do they go to? Can they go to just to you, or can they rely on their peers or families and so on? When can they call for help? When is it appropriate? Because learning a language is difficult, and it will be difficult for everybody. So at which point should that panic set in, that they would be able to, that they should recognize that it is time to ask for help? And also, when how do they do that? Do they interrupt the class to ask a question, or do they send you a message, or do they stay after class, or do they use any other method to reach out and ask for advice, for help, for solutions? And then finally, students also need to feel that they have a support network behind them. Those strong ties to the community, to the school, to the class, to the family, all of that is going to make learning easier. And it is also going to make mistakes that they make more acceptable. Classrooms should be an ideal place, safe place for students to kind of play with language, to try different things, to experiment, because that's how they are going to gradually master that fluency and expand their abilities. So with all of this, you can kind of see how we as teachers really play a crucial role in learning those resiliency skills and dispositions. Now, schools in many ways are ideal places for building this. Students are with us practically every day, often for hours, almost year round. And they are in those school settings, and those experiences that they have are going to shape who they become in the future. Everything that they experience could point to either, okay, if I do this, this is what's going to happen, but I can counter the effect of this in another way. So those experiences that they have are important. They can kind of make them or break them. And that's why the importance of building that resilience in the school. First of all, as I just mentioned, it is essential that the classroom, that the school is a safe and stable environment for them to learn in, both in physical terms, but also psychologically. It is important that they feel that they have that supportive relationship with their peers, that they have a community to fall back on, and that they feel with other classmates that they belong in the classroom, that they are not alone in that learning process. For us as instructors, we need to teach how to build that network, how to create a community out of a classroom. And that can be done through teaching and modeling positive social norms, how you interact, how you talk to each other, how you ask questions, how you share criticisms. All of these things can belong in the classroom, have a crucial role to play. And of course, when students identify with their group, they will feel encouraged to take risks, to make decisions, to try different things, and kind of experiment with learning to find the most effective method for them. That's not going to happen by itself. So we need to support that process. Now, because resilience and belonging, a sense of belonging in my mind, go hand in hand, let's look at a couple of different ways that we can implement small and meaningful changes in the classroom. So I hope that you can see at the very top, but it's that growth mindset language. So one of the key components of resilience is the growth mindset. And it is basically a belief that when you put effort into something, your abilities will improve. So that's kind of that self-driving intrinsic motivation. But we also know that effort in itself, sustaining that effort, especially over time, is not easy. It probably isn't easy to you, and especially when things are not easy, it's not always the easiest route is not always to sustain that effort, but to give up, right? So what we want to do is to create opportunities to show our students that that growth mindset will pay off. So using encouraging language that will focus on that growth will typically normalize challenges of learning in general. So we need to show that, yes, things are difficult and it's okay. That it's supposed to be like this. It is normal. We also need to show them that their motivation will increase if they experience some small successes. And even if they are tiny, they are successes nevertheless. So if we do this on an ongoing basis, we kind of are fueling their fire. And we can use simple phrases, things like, teaching them, instead of saying, I can't do this, say, I am learning. And you, as an instructor, as a teacher, could say, yes, I know this was hard, wasn't it? But hey, we did it. So kind of showing them that sense of success. You can also keep reminding them that we learn through our mistakes, that if it comes easy, we probably will not value it as much. So it is important to see that that learning process is meant to be a challenge. It is something that requires perseverance and persistence. So I would like you to kind of think about ways that you can use those phrases when you talk to students to encourage them to keep that very positive outlook, that growth mindset. I will give you a minute to think about some other phrases, but I'll tie in to that growth mindset the concept of feedback. Our probably primary role in the classroom is to give students feedback that will be formative, that will help them see what they need to do, where they need to improve, but also feedback that is going to help them see what they have already accomplished. So make your feedback specific as possible. Now, qualities of good feedback are that it is timely, so it comes at the right time. It doesn't always mean that it has to be immediate, but it needs to be at the right time so that students are ready to receive it and be able to use it. It needs to be actionable, and so that specific feedback that you give needs to be easily understood. So the example I can think of is when you are teaching grammar, for example, your students will probably know certain terms, like names of tenses and so on, but don't overuse them. Make the language that you use with your students to give them feedback free of that meta language so that they understand exactly what it is that you are saying to them. Basically target it at their level. And make sure also that you start with something positive, that you have that positive mindset yourself. Identify something that they have already done well, that they can do, that maybe they couldn't do before. And then that praise will hopefully result in motivation and self-confidence that they can do hard things as well. And then, of course, after that positive feedback, give them maybe one or two things to work on. Make it small and make it very, very realistic. So instead of asking them to be able to present beautifully in every possible way in front of people, say, okay, focus on how fast you are speaking, or focus on producing this one sound that you are struggling with, and nothing else. That way it gives them something to target. So when I was teaching on the Bachelor of Education program and training those pre-service English language teachers, a common thing throughout every semester was that my students had to be working in the schools, and under the careful watch of a mentor teacher, their experienced mentor teacher. And then I and my colleagues would go and observe them from time to time as they were taking on more and more responsibilities as teachers in the classroom. After each of those observations, we would meet with them and have a little debrief where they would reflect and we would reflect. And we kind of had this rule that we would always start with a positive. And we followed the rule of 3 to 1. So we would always try to think of 3 things that we really enjoyed seeing in the classroom. And sometimes it was very specific to the language that they were teaching, but sometimes it was just, it was related to classroom management or how they interacted with a particular student, how they dealt with disruptions in the classrooms, or how they clearly gave instructions to an activity or scaffolded a student who was having difficulties following. So we always started with the 3 positives and then looked for one specific thing that we felt would be crucial for them to address next time. And sometimes it is not easy to be identifying 3 good things and one that isn't perfect yet. But what it allows you to do, you in the role of a teacher, is to kind of prioritize what is doable, but also what is the most important for that student to do, and to not overwhelm them and intimidate them with a huge challenge that is in front of them that might force them to give up. So setting those tiny, clear, very direct goals would be important for anybody in any context. So stressing that, yes, you are making progress already. Look, you've already done this, and it was great, and perhaps this was the first time that you have seen it in that student. But then encourage setting those realistic goals and say, well, okay, well, next time, let's just talk about this one thing or focus on this one aspect of language that you're doing. If it's writing, maybe it's the grammar in the writing, maybe it's only looking at how ideas are connected from one sentence to the next in a paragraph, and not so much about grammar and punctuation and capital letters and vocabulary choices unless they impact the meaning. So those would be all the different things that would hopefully help you build a sense of accomplishment, while also picking something very specific to address in the future, and that stimulates that growth. I'll give you a minute, perhaps, of some examples that you could of phrases that you could use when you do talk to your students. How would you employ that growth mindset language? How would you help give students praise while also pointing to a specific goal? And I don't see everything in the chat, so there may be many of you in here, but think about what you would do. So even if you don't necessarily share it in the chat, that is okay. Just kind of gather your thoughts. I do see one question that was relayed to me in the chat, and the question is, what are some good examples of helping a student notice their progress by themselves too? So this really addresses kind of making progress visible. There are a couple of things I can think of. One, if you have access to some of the earlier work that your students made, that they put together. So I'm just going to use the example of writing. If in the beginning of the year, they wrote a couple of sentences together in the paragraph, but now are maybe struggling with writing a longer, let's say a longer paper, multi-paragraph paper, you could show them, okay, this is difficult, but look where you started. All you could do was write 2 or 3 sentences together, and look where you are right now. It might not be easy, but you're doing it. So trying to kind of refer back to the examples from the past. If you're thinking about, let's say, grammar skills, tell them what were your difficulties this time last year, and look where you are now. So all of those little things kind of give them a sense of, it forces them to look back on the learning process in general. So they start kind of remembering, okay, I did start with nothing, and here I am. I'm hoping that would allow them to see that progress. It's not always easy because not everybody does have that kind of sense of I can do it, right? So you do need to cultivate it. It needs to be something that becomes part of your regular interactions with students, especially those who are finding things difficult. Okay. So I do have a couple more examples for things that you can do to foster that resilience and build a sense of belonging. So emotional regulation, as I mentioned, being able to be in control of your own emotions is very important, because when things don't go our way, we often feel very stressed. We feel anxiety, which may manifest itself in very different ways in different people. Some close up. Some have this pounding heart and, increased heart rate, and they can't think clearly, and so on. So how that stress manifests itself is different in different people, but it kind of causes a physiological reaction. So although it might seem a little strange, those, the focus that breathing exercises and mindfulness activities will bring can be very simple and very helpful. So what breathing exercises do is typically lower our blood pressure and force us, obviously, to send oxygen into our cells and into our brain, but they bring our heart rate down. So I'm not sure if you are familiar with a very kind of common breathing pattern of 4-7-8. So what that usually is that we inhale, so we breathe in on the count of 4, and then we hold our breath for a count of 7, and then we release our breath and exhale, often with this kind of whoosh on the count of 8. That is meant to kind of flush our bodies with oxygen, but also bring that heart rate down. So in times when students might be, just before a test or a presentation, you get those jitters. I got the jitters today before we started. I'm feeling better now. Now I'm kind of in the flow, but I had that anxiety as well. And it is a natural process. It will happen to all of us because we don't know if everything is going to go according to plan, and we are often dropped in completely new situations. So as silly as it might seem, I'll ask you to do this with me. So we're going to try a couple of times, not too many, but we're going to try a couple of times that breathing technique. So when you breathe in, inhale, and I'll count, and then I'll count when you hold, and then slowly release your breath on the count of 8. All right, are we ready? Okay, so inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can do that with a whoosh. I find that holding the breath is really kind of hard, but it does slow your breath down completely, and your heart rate does go down. Can we try that one more time? Okay, so in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So do this with the students when you see that there is anxiety, when they are struggling. Kind of, if they are looking at a piece of paper, Tell them to put the paper away. Tell them to put the book away. Okay, let's breathe together just for a moment. It takes nothing. You don't need any technology, any resources. All it is you and your breath. And it's a simple and effective way that you can try and regulate emotions. Another thing that you can do is exercise breaks, movement breaks, brain breaks. A very common one that I have often used was something that I learned when my son was in sports as a little kid. And before every big competition that they had to do, big in quotes, their coach would always say, okay, let's shake it out. And they would shake things out like that. So why do we do that? It's because when we are stressed, whether we are aware of it or not, our body tenses. We flex our muscles. This is why our palms get all sweaty. We often kind of clench, we clench our teeth. We kind of sit a little tight, and it's kind of hard to control it. Now, shaking that out physically loosens our muscles, and it brings that tension out. It's an easy physiological thing that we can do to kind of relax. Now, when I do that with kids, especially when I do it the first time and they don't know what to expect, they usually kind of giggle. And you know what? That's awesome, because when you make something a little silly, that laughter is also a tool that you can use to relax people. So shake it out, walk around, perhaps ask students to stand up when they do that, so they are not kind of glued to their chairs and their desks and their books, and just give them a little bit of a break. I have had colleagues who actually kind of planned in their lesson, okay, I'm going to ask them to do like 3 jumping jacks. With little ones, you can do that. With older ones, probably not so much. But you can always try. And you can also ask them to come up with, well, what else could we do for movement that would be fun, that would bring your emotions down. Lastly, journaling or any kind of reflection. I'm a huge fan of reflection in general, both for the students, but also for us as teachers. So when you journal, you basically are kind of putting your emotions out, taking them out of yourself, putting them down on paper. This helps with kind of getting a little bit more distance from the difficulties that you are encountering, and it allows you to kind of see it on the page in a different way, as if it wasn't you, as if you got rid of the tension already. Do remember, though, that journals tend to be very private. Do not make an assignment out of it. Do not collect journals of this kind, for a grade. And do not ask students to share them unless they truly want to share them. So if there is something that they want to communicate with the rest of the class, then you can absolutely allow it. But allow them a safe space to kind of get their emotions out. And it should help them see that there are certain things that maybe they find challenging, but they can overcome. And I kind of, with the not sharing of journals, I mentioned their peers, and building a classroom community is important. Easy things that you can do naturally. You see your students every day. You know their names. Use their names. Make them visible as individuals in the class. As they come into the class, have some sort of morning greeting, hi, Katya, how are you today? Do these daily check-ins. Ask them, how has your day been? So maybe it's 10 o'clock in the morning and they've already had a couple of classes. How did your physics test go? Or, did you like the snow that you saw on the way today, right? You can also wrap the day or wrap the class with kind of end of day reflections. If you have a minute or 10 seconds, you could just say, hey, what was the best thing about today? Keep it positive and keep it kind of focused on what we as a class can do. And then spend some time doing, especially like warm-ups in the beginning of the year, but kind of on an ongoing basis, activities that will address team building. You can ask them to think about what they as a group have done. So, how many times have we collectively flown in a plane or performed on the stage in front of people or been in a very scary situation? And again, that way with the we, rather than, oh, you did this and you did this, you are kind of creating a community out of the classroom. So those interactions in the classroom need to be respectful, and you need to kind of set norms for how they should be working together, how they should be solving problems together, how they should be solving conflicts together. These things will inevitably happen. So you need to be kind of guiding them, especially the youngest ones. How do we do this? Now, you can very easily incorporate some language practice in this. So if you are teaching students how to ask for help, you can use the, could you do this? Can you do this? Would you mind? I would like to. So you can blend the language teaching with the teaching of those respectful interactions. And then a couple of things that I would suggest here that I've tried. One is creating class contracts. This gives students kind of a little bit more agency because they would be creating a set of rules for the class for everybody to follow, including you. And of course, you cannot just sort of let them loose. You could still say, oh, there are certain things that are non-negotiable. So when I assign homework, I do expect that you do this homework. But perhaps there are some additional rules that they can come up with that will make how they work with each other easier, better, more positive. So you could ask them to say, okay, if this is the rule that we all agree on, what's going to happen when that rule is not followed? So think also of some consequences that would be spelled out, that would be clearly understood. You could have that class contract hung in the classroom. You could have them all sign it if you want. Some enjoy it, some don't care. But it allows them to kind of decide what they would like their classroom to be. And then lastly, when you are asking students to work in groups, when you are using group work, pair work, be very clear about assigning them specific roles, giving them very clear directions of what they are responsible for. And this is going to hopefully prevent any conflict from arising, but also allow them to work together better. So clear instructions. Okay, so a couple of other practical, simple things that you can do. A daily gratitude practice, which could be modified in a number of different ways, but the main idea is that you ask each day, what is it that you are grateful for today? And it can be English learning related or otherwise. Still kind of that positive mindset needs to be included in there. So it might be that, what they are grateful for today is learning a new word that sounds really funny and it's fun to say. Or it could also be that they had a really fun activity that they worked on with their friends, or perhaps they read an interesting story, or it could be that they finally learned the spelling of this one word that always tripped them up. Or it could be that, hey, it was snowing today for the first time in the year. So something that they are grateful for each day. If you do this in the beginning of class, it could serve as a little warm-up, and it could be a language warm-up. So, how do you say snow, right? Or how do you say fun activity, or how do you spell something? So then you have that English component in there. So you can use these gratitude comments in their journal, in their private journal. They could put them on pieces of paper. If you have some sort of bulletin board or a wall where you can stick things, they can put them in that gratitude wall. Or it could be just something that's verbalized and not really written in any way, but it kind of sets that positive tone, and it doesn't really require anything special. And another thing would be to kind of similar, a twist on that, is thinking about what peers do for you and how they can support you. So identifying what they have learned from each other, or what they appreciate about each other. Kind of like you may have experienced some warm-ups where you pay a compliment to someone. It could be something like this as well. So it encourages kind of that sense of support. I have support from others. I do appreciate what others do for me. I like other people in my class. And I know that's not always easy. Sometimes, kids typically do not have much choice in who is in their class, but they can still find something that's positive about their classmates. So one example of that phrase would be, what is one positive thing that you have learned from your peer, from your classmate this week or today? Okay. Now, one other thing that I haven't mentioned yet is our role in modeling resilience. So all of you as language teachers, to be in that classroom as a language teacher, as an English teacher, you have learned. And you have probably failed along the way a couple of times too, right? So be open about this. Share your own personal experiences with failure and with overcoming that failure. Focus on learning that you have picked up along the way. So think about those mistakes that you've made that maybe now you laugh about, but that you learned from. All of this shows you as a normal, natural human being who is vulnerable sometimes, who is not perfect, and it builds that trust with the students. But you can, of course, also model, well, this is what I did in that situation, and students will remember, because they do look up to us as role models. They often think of us as people who are successful, who have succeeded in learning. So being able to show them how we overcome difficulties can be very useful. I was thinking quite recently, when I was put in the teaching context where I had students in the classroom and online at the same time. I had never taught in that modality before, and I was really, really stressed. I tried to normalize it. I just said, okay, please speak up if you see that something isn't working. This is new to me. I still have to learn this, and it's okay, and I will make mistakes. And I did find some solutions, and I ended up using two different skills. So I had my two different screens. So I had students who were online, visible on my laptop, and then I had my other computer in the classroom used for displaying, sharing resources, and kind of managing the classroom activities. And it did get better. And now I don't exactly laugh about it. It's not my favorite modality, but I know that I learned how to handle it. So be authentic, be yourself, and that's going to teach your students a lot of things as well. So I hope that through all of this, you have noticed why that sense of belonging is really important for building resilience in the classroom. It helps students feel that they are not the only ones facing those difficulties, and it encourages them to persist. It reduces that feeling of isolation, and it definitely encourages them to take risks, which you absolutely have to do to be able to get better with something so ongoing as a language. Learning a language, you kind of have to take risks, and it's not easy for anybody to master. It can be a very scary experience. So I know we're kind of close to time. I only have a couple of things that I want to summarize, but I'll give you maybe 1 minute to think, if you can use the chat, what is one way that you currently foster resilience and belonging in the classroom? I do recognize that you probably have a lot of expertise already. You know your students, you know your classroom context. What do you already do to foster resilience that maybe I didn't mention? I do not see the chat. And I also don't know how many of you are still with us today. So, okay. So for the sake of time, I'll just move on because we have about 8 minutes left. So I do have a couple more things. One of them is scenarios, and I have a few, but maybe I'll share the PowerPoint a little later with you. And I do, by the way, I forgot to mention that up front, but I do have a handout with some of the ideas listed, and I believe that it's going to be shared with all the participants afterwards. So one scenario that I have here is of a student who is in an English class and understands English quite well, is generally a very good, studious learner, but rarely speaks in class because she is afraid of making mistakes, especially in that kind of public setting. So perhaps you asked, okay, let me see. Okay, oh, I did have one question. Okay, how to grade students in order to keep this resilient atmosphere. Grades are an essential part of our school system, and just grading A all the time will devalue the efforts. Yes, and I absolutely agree. I don't think giving A's to everybody just for the effort really pays. It just becomes kind of like, oh, it doesn't matter what I do, she's going to give me an A. So what I would do is you probably don't grade every single piece that students produce. If there are any exercises that are not graded, they are simply just used there as formative assessments, where you give students feedback. Use those opportunities and make them maybe more common than the ones that are graded. I think in some maybe more extreme cases, when students kind of seem to fail over and over and over, perhaps allowing them to redo an assignment if it's a writing assignment, they could you could ask that they come to you and with a draft, so you could guide them through it, and you could kind of do a little piece together, and then hopefully that's something that students could then continue on their own. Another thing you could do is, if you are using some sort of rubrics for speaking and writing assignments, you could occasionally, probably not for big assessments, but maybe occasionally, you could have one criterion of that assignment be sort of weighted a little bit heavier. So if your student generally writes beautifully, but has problems with punctuation or with spelling, maybe focus on that one thing only, and stress, give feedback on, okay, you actually did better this time. You didn't make as many mistakes as previous time. One other thing that I would probably do, and I have done, is at the end of my, like closer to the end of the term, I would always offer students to kind of like uncheck, not grade, one of the assignments from the term. And obviously that would be perhaps something that they didn't score very highly on, and they can tell me what it is that, I have also just said, okay, I'm going to drop your lowest grade in the term. Just one, not a big test, but any of the like homework assignments and class assignments that were graded, I would drop the lowest one, just to kind of give them a little bit of hope to keep going. I hope that's some ideas that you could use. All right, back to Natalia. So if Natalia doesn't speak and we ask her to give a presentation in class, and perhaps she froze halfway through, the stress took over and she teared up, sat down, kind of gave up and said, I'll never be good at this. So things that you can do in that situation is reassure her and everybody else in the classroom that everybody struggles sometimes, that these mistakes happen. You can do the breathing exercise. You could ask her to perhaps present without standing in front of the class. She could be sitting down at her desk. She could be in the corner. She doesn't have to feel so exposed as well. And you could also set up structured activities when in their group, they kind of practice speaking in small groups, maybe with people that they trust, with their best friends, so that they know that they get to rehearse it before they stand in front of the class, if that is something that you require. I'll give you maybe one more. I have 3 of these scenarios, but I'll just do maybe one more. So if we have a student who failed the grammar test, and let's say that this is, they're preparing for a really high stakes English exam, and they study, and this one student still failed a grammar test before that big exam, and is now feeling really discouraged. Like, I will never pass this exam. This is a long gone conclusion that I'm going to fail. Ask, first of all, what is it that went wrong on that test? If they studied, which they probably did, was it the material that was in there? Was it the format of the test that tripped them up? Was it their test-taking strategy, taking too long on the first section and not being able to finish? Was it the nerves? Shake it out. Breathing exercises. Try a few different approaches there. If it is the content, think about breaking it down into like smaller components and giving them additional practice, maybe for the whole class, actually, because typically everybody would benefit from it anyway. But help rebuild that confidence kind of very gradually so that they feel encouraged taking the test. And again, look back on the past successes and say, well, you did that before. I believe that you can do it again. I'll skip the last scenario. This is kind of like the final tips and giveaways, takeaways for you. So use names, use these greetings at the beginning of the class, use class warm-ups, especially the ones that build the community, what can we do? Encourage students to share ideas, and when you ask them to work in groups, assign specific roles, teach them how to collaborate, co-create assignments with them so they feel like they have a vested interest into how they're going to be assessed, what kind of choices they have in the learning process. Ask them for feedback often. Doesn't have to be formal. What worked for you today? Should I be using more of those activities? Is this something that you find useful? Help them set those very realistic small goals, provide them feedback, use these brain breaks, and then celebrate successes and ask them to reflect over and over on their growth as learners. And that's basically all I have for you today. You do have my email here on display. Feel free to reach out with comments and questions that you may have. I will make sure that you get a copy of the handout to download with some resources and some of these ideas in there. And thank you all very, very much.